All right, perfect. So, hello everyone. Today with us today we have Kim Stachenfeld. She's a senior research scientist at DeepMind, which is one of the world's leading artificial intelligence research labs and the source of some of the world's most cutting edge AI technologies. And Kim has conducted research at DeepMind for 8 years now and focuses on research at the intersection of neuroscience and machine learning. Her work's been published in several renowned journals and has been cited over 1,500 times. So we're so honored to have you with us here today. And yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Hi, yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here and to be talking to all of you. Thanks for the nice introduction and for the extra citations. I don't mind.
Okay, so just to get started, I guess, most of us here are still in high school. So obviously we don't have that much experience in the real world with research as much as you do, obviously. And so I guess we'd all love to know, what was your inspiration to enter the fields of computational neuroscience?
Yeah, that's I had somewhat an unusual trajectory, I think, just in terms of my research interests. I didn't do any computer science in high school at all. And didn't really consider myself much of a computer person, partly because I thought being a computer person was like, someone who knows how to like get stuff to print. That's like still not really my forte. But I really liked math quite a lot. I loved science. And so I loved people. I think for especially like a lot of times many engineering disciplines and STEM disciplines aren't always thought of as particularly person forward. But I found people so interesting, and I was like, what blends that? Neuroscience, and then when I learned more about the specifics, computational neuroscience really focuses on that. So when I went to this is sort of what I was working through in high school. I think the first time I ever Googled like math neuroscience just to see, it was the beginning of the internet probably. And I was like, does anybody do both of those things? I learned that there was a theoretical neuroscience center at Columbia. This was actually kind of a thing people did. And so when I went to college, I applied as a double major in biochemistry and math, and ended up kind of switching that to chemical engineering and math. Neither of which is neuroscience, but that wasn't really a major at the time. And I really kept kind of tinkering with my major the whole time I was in college. I was very indecisive about what exactly I wanted to do or research or work in. I didn't really even know that research was a full-time job. So I kind of was going all over the place. Maybe I would be pre-med. At some point I took a philosophy course, which was like a philosophy of artificial intelligence course. And they talked a lot about the problem of decision-making and how a creature can act in a very complex world with lots of things to think about. How do you decide what your goals should be? And then how do you go from your goals to like the steps you need to execute it? And I was like, yes, how do you do that? Because like, I'm really struggling with it. I got really interested in artificial intelligence, as well as really that problem in neuroscience, decision-making, and how to go from information you learn to something you can actually use. So then I was a junior in college by then. I started taking computer science courses, loved it, but was like too late to major in it. And I ended up applying to graduate school in both computational neuroscience as well as machine learning. I wanted to do some combination, really just study these problems in general, both in terms of how they manifest in the brain and also how they could work in computers. And I ended up going to grad school for neuroscience with a professor who was really interested in using machine learning algorithms as a metaphor for the brain. Like we know how we have some ideas about how to make machines learn stuff. Maybe human brains or animal brains are working in the same way. That's what I worked on in graduate school for a while, until my graduate advisor decided he didn't feel like being a professor anymore and wanted to go work for DeepMind, and asked if some of his students wanted to come along too. So that's how I ended up moving to DeepMind, which is where I've been for the last 6 years. They have a bit of neuroscience research, a bit of machine learning quite a bit of machine learning research. So I've gotten to really work on both of those problems, which is really like a huge privilege.
Oh, that's fascinating, honestly. I think we can all agree that like as a high school student, for us, like hearing about your journey and like hearing about how, because I think a lot of us are still trying to decide like where do we want to go in life, what we want to do. And so hearing about how you decided eventually, that's really inspiring for all of us.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember being really, really scared when I didn't know what I wanted to do. Like, what if I never find what I want to do? And I think the two kind of things I've settled on with that are one, on the one hand, you have lots of time and like you will find lots of things and many things you've never thought of or heard of or really occurred to you might be a good fit. So exploration is really useful. And then the other thing is that so many jobs and so many areas involve so many different skills. Like if you do science, a huge amount of it might be math or reading or research, but also interacting with people and also just basic organization things about how to structure your time. And every job kind of has different ratios of these things. So whatever you like, you'll like probably find a way that many jobs will work for it. And a big part of it is just, to emphasize the aspects you like and to make sure you're working with people you like, and people who you feel at home with. And that goes a long way beyond just finding like what is the perfect exact fit for me.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And I guess, so switching gears slightly from your earlier journey, I guess, we'd love to learn more about your work at DeepMind itself as a researcher. So obviously you're a highly experienced researcher and you have significant experience and expertise in computational neuroscience. But I guess out of all the research works you've conducted, which would you say has been your favorite?
Oh, that's a good question. I think uh, we have some recent work that I was really excited about for a couple of reasons. So the title of the work, I can't remember exactly the phrasing, but it was about like structure fluid interactions, um, and using learned simulators to design solutions to these type of problems. And that's kind of a lot of fancy words. But basically, what this paper was about was how to use machine learning models to design solutions to different problems. And I think this is kind of an exciting area for a bunch of reasons. Um, the gist of the project itself is we used machine learning algorithms to try and predict what's going to happen to a system. We were particularly interested in how this could be used for engineering. So we used fluid systems. So, let's say you have a bit of water and you have a simulator that says, oh, this water is going to fall until it hits something and then it's going to splash and bounce around. You can use machine learning to predict, to basically learn how these dynamics generally unfold, and then take a beginning frame of a system and see what's going to happen to it. And our paper was really asking, can we use models like this, machine learning models like this, not just to predict what happened, but also to control what will happen, and say, if the fluid is going to hit some platform and bounce off, can we make it bounce over here rather than over here? Like really like control what's going to happen. The reason this was thought, there's a couple of reasons this was thought to be hard. And one of them is just that if you're trying to make predictions over really long periods of time, you have to get a lot right in order to make a good prediction. If you make a little mistake, that feeds into your next prediction. And if you make a little more of a mistake, you can just get really far away if you keep doing this over time. And we found basically that there's a certain architecture class that supports these sort of predictions really very well. The reason overall I'm very excited about this direction is I think using machine learning to design new solutions for engineering problems, being able to invent new things, is something that would be really, really very exciting. That you could have like almost something that starts to resemble like creativity as well as something that has a lot of useful applications. So I was just kind of excited to work in this area a little bit. I also was excited, I think in general, using machine learning to make predictions over long periods of time could have a lot of potential in tons of different fields. I think it's exciting to see what that works for, what the challenges are and how to fix them.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's really fascinating just because I think, yeah, as you said, it have a lot of implications in a lot of other fields as well. So I guess kind of branching off of that, how do you think your work at DeepMind currently and in the past fits into the larger field of AI and machine learning? And how do you think also you already like explained it to some extent, but how do you think your work can be applied in the real world as well?
Yeah, so a lot of the work that I both in machine learning and in neuroscience, a major theme of my work is how to learn to make predictions, how you can use learning algorithms to say, here's where I am right now, what's going to happen in the future. That's broadly very useful. It's also not super unique. Lots of problems in machine learning are really trying to get at this question. A lot of the language models right now that people are super excited about are framed in this way. Here's the first sentence. Can you tell me what the rest of the essay might look like? It's very much trained these are models that are trained to predict what kinds of words tend to come next in a data set. So I think the work that that I have worked on and the folks on the same team as me work on is how to apply these in certain settings that are a good model for many physical systems. So rather than focusing on language data, we've been focusing a lot on things that you might want an engineer to reason about, like how fluid might fall, how a structure might bounce against another structure, how systems that are more physical and scientific might unfold over time. And then in neuroscience, how an animal's experience might unfold over time. So these are really like similar prediction problems in a sense, but they have different statistics associated with them, and they have different things that make them hard. So one thing that we often use, like a set of techniques that I'm particularly excited about and work on a lot, are data sets that can be structured as graphs or networks. So if you have, for instance, a coffee cup that you want to think about, oh, my blur is kind of ruining this, but you see a coffee cup, you can model this coffee cup is a pretty complex object. If I threw it, it would interact in some pretty complicated ways. Depending on the orientation, something might hook into the inside or it would bounce off the underside. If I threw it really hard, it might shatter. And one way to model this is to model it as a set of points that all lie on the surface of this cup and the faces that join those points, something called a mesh. So modeling how meshes unfold over time, or how a bunch of little particles that only interact when they bounce into each other interact over time, has some really specific structure that we can incorporate when we want to do these kind of prediction problems. So that's a big focus that we're working on, is really like how to adapt prediction to this type of object you want to reason about. When you have really complex objects that have certain structure that you want to bake into the prediction process.
Oh, that sounds so cool. Because so I've personally, I've messed around with like natural language processing before, and so I've done a little bit of that, but I've never actually known that like you can do that with like physical systems as well. So I'm definitely going to look into that more after this. That's really cool.
Yeah, there's some lovely papers I can send you from some other folks on our team too, if you're interested in neural networks, but for physics prediction or over graphs or meshes, which are these other kinds of data objects that can really do some cool things. They have a lot of cool mathematical properties too.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I guess like kind of moving on from like what's happening currently. I guess you already explained like some of these technologies that you're working on at DeepMind are really like innovative technologies. I've never heard of physical systems before, and like how like AI is being used to simulate them and everything. So that like this, obviously you're at the forefront of a lot of innovative AI research. And so I guess how would you see your field of computational neuroscience and I guess the work you're doing at AI and at DeepMind, how do you see that evolving in the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, can I predict how the field of predictions will unfold? The Yeah, the obvious caveat, I guess, is that I'm not entirely sure. I think one thing that there's been really a number of pretty huge breakthroughs in the past few years. Image generation is now incredibly good. Language prediction, fantastically good. And machine learning has also been applied to some really fundamentally important research questions, like predicting protein folding, whereas previously it had done things that were impressive, but maybe didn't interface with the real world quite so much. Like having something that plays Go really well, that is really impressive. People thought that was going to take more time than it did. And it's objectively hard to do, but it doesn't really touch people's day-to-day lives so much. So I think the fact that AI is now being so broadly used and really touching things that matter to people is a really different phase of machine learning research to be in. So I'm not exactly sure what that's going to look like. One thing I've noticed from being in both neuroscience and machine learning is that there has always been a lot of talk really of analogies between how the brain works and how machine learning works. Maybe machine learning can help us understand the brain. Maybe understanding the brain will give us new ideas for machine learning. There's some historical precedent for this, lots of philosophical debate about how this works. But there's a new way that these have been interacting, which the director of our department has referred to as like human supervised, that we're taking all this human data from these algorithms that are either just taking data humans made or now interacting with humans in the real world, and that's being used to inform them. So if you're a person in neuroscience or cognitive science or the humanities, there's really a much different way that these, like, another dimension of these models to consider is not just how to make them as good as possible, but really like, what are they doing in the world? Are we happy with what they're doing? Do we want it to be better in some ways? Is it doing a good job of what it's supposed to do, but it turns out what it's supposed to do actually isn't really a very good thing for society? There's all these kind of questions that are really, we have to figure out how to answer really quickly, and are kind of deep philosophical questions as well as just technical engineering questions. So that's a big thing that I've noticed. Another thing about the just again from the neuroscience and machine learning perspective is that these models that we use that do a really good job at machine learning, it's kind of hard to understand how they work. There's a lot of people talk about explainability, transparency, interpretability. They're just big giant models that are trained on incredibly complex predictive problems, and it's hard to really know how they work. In neuroscience, the whole point of everything is we want to figure out how the brain works. It's really like, if you can model it but not understand it, you're not really solving the key problem. So this is sort of a key tension between these two fields, but also something that, like, you know, both invites a question for both fields, because maybe the brain is too complex to understand in some of the ways we might want, and maybe we really need to have this transparency and explainability for these machine learning algorithms to be safely deployed. Anyway, I think that's one big direction. There's probably some others too.
Yeah, I definitely agree, because I think, yeah, I think the whole thing with, I know just based on like what I've seen, like with AI and everything, the big question is with the ethics of using it, and especially I guess with computational neuroscience, I think it's related to, like, I've seen brain-computer interfaces. There's a lot of ethical problems with it right now, and people are having a lot of discussion, a lot of debate over it. So it's really important to see, like, with all of these upcoming technologies, we also see a lot of safety and ethical decisions made alongside.
Yeah, I think that's a really great example. I mean, that also starts to get into the ethics of medical interventions, which also has a
Yeah.
huge literature with pretty checkered past. But
Yeah, definitely. Okay, yeah, that's really inspiring, actually, just because it shows that, like, we're not even near the peak of what AI is going to be really able to affect our society, like how it's going to affect our society. And I think for a lot of us students right now as well, we're just getting started, and we're trying to get involved in this already significantly grown field the past few years. And so we want to make sure that, like, when we're getting in right when it's about to get good. So, and we can really contribute to that as well. So that'll be really awesome for all of us, I think. I guess
I actually,
this,
a quick point on
yeah,
that. I think because I thought about that a bit before joining this call, and I think one meta point about the state of machine learning is it's changing really quickly. So right now, computer science, safe major, like very good thing to study, lots of jobs. but just keep your eye out. It's not like things change quickly. It's not always going to be predictable super far in advance. What the next big thing is going to be, where people will move. I think it's doesn't seem overwhelmingly likely to me that we'll solve every problem in computer science in the next 4 years. But it's just in a world that is changing very quickly. Advice I've heard from a couple different people and seemed very rational to me was just to keep your head up and make sure your things haven't shifted under your feet too much.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I guess for just I asked our community before this interview, what are some of the questions they'd like to ask you specifically? And a lot of people asks, what are some of the things that a high school student like us right now could do to at least dip our toes, get started in the field of computational neuroscience, which I understand is like really complex, but just to get initially started, do you have any advice for us?
For computational neuroscience, I guess the main thing I would get started with for oh, actually, I have a really good answer. So there's a company called Backyard Brains that makes these kits for you to do neuroscience on like the on your own time, in your own space, in ways that are pretty like easy and plug and play. So one I remember is a human one where you can get a recording kit and put like a little sensor on your arm and twitch around and feel stuff, and like you can like do recordings on yourself and then analyze them, and that's pretty fun. They have another one which probably isn't for everyone, but is a really classic neuroscience experiment where you record from the nerves of a cockroach. I think you have to get your own cockroach. um, I don't know if that will appeal to, I don't know if that's how I win hearts and minds for neuroscience. Like get a cockroach and play with it. But they have a couple of these where you can do a little bit of neuroscience on your own, collect your own data and analyze it. That's just neuroscience, not necessarily computational neuroscience. Other things you can do is get your hands on some data that people have posted online and try analyzing it. What I would first do is try and replicate analyses other people have done. Like if you can find, there's some places where you can get data set of human MRIs. These are scans of human brains, and they'll find things like when people look at pictures of faces, the fusiform face area always lights up. So you can look at those data sets and see, can I analyze it and find the same thing? Is there anything else that lights up when people look at faces? If people look at different kinds of faces, do things light up in different ways? Problems like if people look at tools, maybe do things light up in different ways? And that can be like a really fun way to start playing around with neuroscience concepts. I definitely would recommend you guys check out Neuromatch. This is a new academy, Neuromatch Academy, that was started during the pandemic. And they have come up with just some incredible tools for teaching neuroscience, computational neuroscience especially, and making data sets and problems available that you can ask your own questions of. A lot of really big shot professors have like put their very nice fancy data sets with thousands of neurons up to Neuromatch for people to do projects with. It's pretty fun. People are involved from all over the world. It really reminds me of the program that you guys have set up here, and it was set up during the pandemic, and it got so it was a good opportunity to get just people involved from all over the place. So that's definitely a cool thing to check out. The other, if you're interested in getting started with some machine learning problems, you probably have had speakers who've already given recommendations on that. And I think training, just kind of getting yourself a data set and starting to play around with it is really like a great thing to do. Train regression models, train neural networks, just plot it and see what the data looks like. You can do even both computational neuroscience and machine learning by doing whatever machine learning stuff you would have done, but on a data set that happens to come from some brains.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. I think we'll all check that out. I think also when I post this video recording of this, I'll also link those sources that you just mentioned, so anyone can check those out easily. And I guess so we have a couple more minutes left in this meeting. So I know we have some people here with us today. So does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask him, or anything that they'd like to say?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So, question for Kim: how did your early life play into you uh, develop your interest in neuroscience and artificial intelligence?
Yeah, that's a good question because I think up until maybe high school, I really was not. I always really liked math and I really liked art, and I didn't really kind of get into science until I was a bit older. I think the way that I think about it, I kind of the way that I thought about the transition, especially, is I really liked thinking about abstract problems. It's why I liked math. It's why I liked drawing and trying to come up with new things to draw. Um, and at some point when I was in high school, I think I really had, I don't know if like Margaret O'Hara is still a teacher at Chatham High School, but she was my biology teacher. Um, and she just had a very captivating way of describing what was going on in the body, in biology, and just like the ability to visualize these things you couldn't see, and visualize these like concepts and systems that I never would have been able to think about, like a really complex interaction thing that never really could have come out of my own brain. It was imported by the scientific knowledge. I just loved it. I found it really exciting. Chemistry too. I loved chemistry, like learning like the atoms in a table are vibrating. I just like think about that all the time still. I think this idea of like, you can get really cool mental pictures from science was something that I found really exciting, and I think got me interested in doing that professionally rather than art, where I felt like I would at some level, I don't know, science seemed like a way to kind of constantly get new ideas and have them be grounded in some source other than my own brain. So I think that I kind of got to science through art, which I think is probably not a super representative pathway, but definitely common. I know lots of scientists who love art or love music or have some other kind of more freewheeling creative form of expression that they feel like really relates to them. And I think I've always liked puzzles and problems and thinking about things, and had was surrounded by people who also did and let me flex that muscle a little bit. So I think that was a big influence as well. Oh, also Isaac Asimov short stories. That was a profound early influence on me. I highly recommend he has an anthology of short stories, which is really A plus, and highly recommend. A little dated now, but the ideas are great.
And what major institution did you go to pursue your
So
education?
yeah, so for high school, Chatham High School. For graduate or for college, I went to Tufts, and for grad school, I went to Princeton. And Princeton has a number of advantages, like in addition to being a very like nice, fancy, shiny school. Its neuroscience department was like really interested in machine learning to a larger extent than a lot of other neuroscience programs. It's kind of a tiny neuroscience program, but they had a really specific focus that was aligned to what I wanted. I'll say also, I mean, there was a lot of things that were very, like, I was very fortunate in how my trajectory worked out. I graduated without debt. I was like able to navigate the school system pretty effectively. I had like a bunch of people who were experts who advised me in a lot of stuff. And I know that there's other folks in my graduate program who took like different routes, and that also ended up working out well for them. Since, for instance, like, people went to Rutgers or people were RAs for a little while. But in general, it is like, it's hard to get advice from any given person if their trajectory or their strategy isn't always aligned. I think that's something people often don't always think about when they're giving advice.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, that was really inspirational, I think. Does anyone else have any questions or? Okay. I think we're just about like hitting the 30-minute mark here. So I think I can speak for everyone who joined us today and for everyone listening online that you and all your work and your experiences and expertise have really been inspirational for all of us. And yeah, I think it's really opened up our eyes to this whole new field that we've never really known about before. So thank you for that. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. Really great to meet all of you. If you've got any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. If you want any advice on anything, if you're considering like questions in this field, neuroscience or machine learning, happy to respond.
Yeah, I can when I post a video as well, I'll link the website, your personal website as well, so people can reach out to you there if they'd like to.
Sounds good.
Perfect.